The cold was the first thing Anya knew each morning. It seeped through the thin straw mattress in her small attic room, a constant, unwelcome companion that settled deep in her bones. Before the first hint of dawn painted the sky in shades of gray, she was already moving, her bare feet silent on the rough wooden floorboards. In the main house of the Dry Creek clan, noise was a privilege for those who mattered. Anya was a ghost, a shadow tasked with serving, and her value was measured in her silence and invisibility. Down in the kitchen, the air was thick with the smell of stale ale and old wood smoke. She worked with an economy of motion born from years of practice, stoking the embers in the hearth, hauling water from the well, and setting a meager stew to bubble in a blackened pot. She was small for her 19 years, a wisp of a girl with hair the color of dishwater and eyes that held the perpetual gray of a storm-clouded sky. Scars, thin and pale like silver threads, crisscrossed her hands and arms, souvenirs of a childhood filled with neglect and careless cruelty. She was the broken Omega, a title whispered behind her back and branded onto her soul. Her older sister, Sabine, entered the kitchen like a minor storm, her perfect golden hair already braided, her lips curled in a familiar sneer. "Is it ready yet? Some of us have important things to do today," she said, her voice sharp. Anya simply nodded, her gaze fixed on the pot, as she ladled the steaming thin broth into a bowl. As she turned to place it on the table, Sabine shifted, a deliberate, calculated movement. The bowl tilted. Hot stew sloshed over the side, splashing across Anya's bare feet. A searing pain shot up her leg, a fiery agony that made her gasp, but no sound escaped her lips. She hadn't uttered a word, not a single one, in 10 years. Her voice was a locked room in a house full of ghosts. "Clumsy thing," Sabine snapped, stepping back as if Anya was something foul. "Look at the mess you've made." Her father, Alpha Gideon, appeared in the doorway, drawn by the noise. His eyes, small and hard, landed not on his daughter's scalded skin, but on the puddle spreading across the floor. A wave of disgust washed over his face. He didn't need to speak. That look was a language Anya understood fluently. It said, worthless. It said, burden. Without a word, Anya dropped to her knees, grabbing a rag. The sharp sting of the burn was nothing compared to the familiar, hollow ache in her chest. She cleaned, her movements mechanical, her face a blank mask hiding the turmoil within. She was an object, a piece of faulty equipment, and this was simply her function. Later that day, the scent of rain and unfamiliar fur filled the hall. A hulking lichen, the alpha of the rival Stone Fang clan, sat at their table, his presence consuming all the air in the room. His grin was a predator's, and his eyes roamed their meager home with open contempt. Gideon was sweating, his own alpha authority shrunken and pathetic in the face of this raw power. They were talking about debts, about territory, about blood. Anya was serving them watered-down ale, keeping her eyes down, trying to melt into the very walls. Then she heard her name. It was a shock, like a hand grabbing her from the shadows. "I have something to settle the debt," Gideon said, his voice slick with a desperate sort of courage. He gestured toward her. "My youngest." The Stone Fang Alpha's eyes raked over Anya, a slow, appraising look that made her skin crawl. He saw her slight frame, the scars, the silent, downcast gaze. He grunted. "She's a broken one, Gideon," the Alpha rumbled, a low threat in his voice. "Mute. What use is a mute Omega?" Gideon shoved Anya forward a step. The floorboards creaked beneath her trembling feet. "She doesn't speak and she's weak," her father admitted, the words like stones thrown at her. "But she's obedient. She'll do whatever you ask. Take her. The debt is paid." Anya's head swam. The room tilted. This was it. This was the transaction. She was no longer a daughter, if she ever had been. She was currency. She risked a glance at her mother, Mara, who stood near the hearth. For a single shattering second, Anya searched for a flicker of protest, a hint of sorrow, a mother's love. She found only the cold, hard glint of relief. The burden was finally being lifted. The journey was a blur of jarring motion and cold rain. The two Stone Fang warriors tasked with transporting her treated her like livestock, shoving her into the back of a rickety cart. They spoke over her, their laughter coarse and cruel. As they pushed deeper into the sprawling ancient forest that separated the territories, the sky tore open. Rain fell in blinding sheets, turning the dirt track into a river of mud. A crack of thunder split the air, and the horses shrieked, rearing in panic. One of the warriors cursed, fighting the rains. The other looked back at Anya, huddled and shivering under a threadbare blanket. His eyes were cold, devoid of pity. "She's more trouble than she's worth," he spat. The Alpha wanted payment, not a drowned rat. The cart lurched to a stop. Before Anya could process what was happening, a rough hand grabbed her arm and hauled her to her feet. She was thrown from the cart, landing hard in the slick, cold mud. The impact stole the air from her lungs. Through the roar of the storm, she heard their laughter, a final, fading sound of contempt. The cart rumbled away, its tracks already vanishing under the deluge. She was alone, utterly and completely. The rain plastered her thin clothes to her skin, and a chill that had nothing to do with the weather sank into her soul. She had been cast out, discarded like trash on the side of the road. Her family had sold her. Her new owners had abandoned her. She was worth nothing, not even the effort of killing. Lying in the mud, with the forest groaning around her and the storm raging above, Anya felt the last of her fight drain away. She closed her eyes, believing this was where she would die, a broken thing finally succumbing to the storm. The forest was a beast of teeth and shadow, and the storm was its roaring breath. Anya crawled, the mud a greedy, sucking thing that pulled at her limbs, trying to claim her for the earth. Every muscle screamed, and the cold was a blade sliding between her ribs. This was the end. A quiet, pathetic end for a quiet, pathetic girl. But then, through the sheets of rain, a darker shadow loomed against the gray rock face. A hollow, a mouth in the stone, a cave. With the last dregs of her strength, she dragged herself toward it, collapsing onto the dry, dusty ground just inside, her body a trembling heap of soaked rags and bruised bones. The air inside was thick, heavy with the scent of wet fur, old blood, and something else. A low, guttural growl that vibrated through the stone floor and into her very marrow. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She had traded the storm for a lair. Slowly, she pushed herself up, her eyes adjusting to the gloom. And then she saw them, not one, but a dozen massive wolves, their forms sprawled across the cave floor. Their fur was matted with blood and mud, their breathing shallow and ragged. They were enormous, larger than any wolf she had ever seen, with shoulders like boulders and jaws that could snap a man in two. Yet they were dying. A deep, agonizing pain radiated from them, a palpable wave of suffering that washed over her, silencing her own fear. This was a language she understood. Pain. She saw not the monsters, but the hurt. Her own misery was a familiar weight, but theirs was a fresh, raw wound in the world. Hesitantly, she moved closer to the nearest one, a great black wolf with a deep gash along its flank. It lifted its head, a low warning rumbling in its chest, its yellow eyes clouded with fever. Anya simply met its gaze, her own gray eyes holding nothing but a shared understanding of agony. She reached out a trembling hand, not to pet, but to assess. The wolf flinched, then went still, as if sensing the intent behind her touch. With deliberate, practiced movements, she tore a strip from the hem of her already tattered dress. She found moss growing near the cave's damp entrance, gathering handfuls of it, its absorbent properties something her grandmother had taught her long ago. She worked through the night, a silent ghost moving among giants. She cleaned their wounds, packed them with moss, and used pieces of her own clothing for bandages, her touch impossibly gentle. For one of the younger wolves, shivering violently, she curled her small body against its massive one, offering the last of her warmth. She did not know why. It was simply what she had to do. Dawn broke, a pale, watery light filtering into the cave. Anya awoke not to the cold stone, but to an unnerving warmth. She was surrounded, but they were not wolves. 12 immense lichen warriors sat or knelt in a silent circle around her, their gazes fixed on her with an expression she couldn't decipher. It wasn't hunger or threat. It was reverence. The young wolf she had held was now a young man with panicked eyes, who quickly looked away as she stirred. Her breath caught in her throat. The cave entrance was blocked by a figure that dwarfed them all. He was a colossus, a mountain of muscle and dark fur, built on a scale that defied nature. His hair was the color of a starless night, and his presence was so absolute it seemed to suck the very air from the cave. One of his eyes was a piercing liquid gold. The other was a blind silver scar, a testament to a violence she could barely imagine. This was Cain, the alpha king of the Blackstone Pack, a monster of legend. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. She was trapped. This was the true end. He would tear her apart for daring to touch his men, but he did not move to attack. Instead, he took a step forward, and then another, his movements deliberate and silent. He lowered himself to one knee before her, the gesture so incongruous with his terrifying power that the ground itself seemed to hold its breath. His gold and silver eyes scanned her, taking in her slight frame, the mud on her skin, the scars that littered her arms. He gently reached out a hand, his fingers broad and calloused, and brushed a thumb over a thin white scar on her cheek, a long-ago gift from her father's ring. Anya flinched, a lifetime of conditioning screaming at her to expect a blow. His touch was warm, impossibly gentle. His voice, when he spoke, was not a roar, but a low, resonant thunder that vibrated in her soul. "They called you broken." Anya stared, her mind blank with shock. His gaze held hers, an intensity burning there that was both possessive and protective. He saw everything, the fear, the years of pain, the silence, and he did not look away. "I see perfection," he continued, his voice a raw whisper, "in the way your pieces fit with mine." The words shattered the world she knew. Broken. It was her name, her identity. But he spoke it as a lie. He looked at her not as a flaw, but as a treasure. He rose to his full, intimidating height, shrugging off the heavy, fur-lined cloak from his shoulders. He wrapped it around her, enveloping her in its warmth and the scent of pine, storm, and sheer power. The fabric was heavy, rich, a world away from the threadbare rags she wore. Without another word, he scooped her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. Her head fell against his chest, the steady, powerful beat of his heart a drum against her ear. He carried her out of the cave and into the misty dawn. His 12 warriors fell into silent formation behind them, a royal guard for a girl who had, hours before, been trash on the side of a road. The journey to the Blackstone Fortress was a dream. For the first time in her life, Anya was not cold. For the first time, she was not walking, but being carried. For the first time, she felt utterly, completely safe. The rhythmic sway of his stride was a lullaby, and the solid wall of his chest was a shield against the entire world. She risked a glance up at his face. His jaw was set, his gaze fixed forward, but the fierce, protective light in his golden eye never wavered. He was not taking her to a new prison. He was taking her home. The gates of Ironhold were not forged from metal, but carved from the living rock of the mountain itself, vast and imposing. Yet as Cain carried her through them, the fortress did not feel like a prison. It felt like a sanctuary. The air inside was warm, alive with the crackle of a dozen hearths and the rich scent of roasting meat, pine, and beeswax. Polished stone floors reflected the firelight, and thick, dark furs were draped over every surface. This was not the cold, damp squalor of Dry Creek. This was a place of wealth, strength, and warmth. The members of the Blackstone Pack, who had gathered in the Great Hall, were just as formidable as their home. Warriors and mothers, elders and children, all bore an air of quiet power. They watched as their Alpha King passed, their gazes a mixture of shock, curiosity, and a deep, abiding respect. They did not look at Anya with the familiar sneer of contempt she had known her whole life. They looked at her as if she were a sacred relic, a treasure their king had brought home from a long and perilous quest. They bowed their heads as she passed, a wave of deference that sent a tremor of disbelief through her. Cain carried her up a winding stone staircase to a set of massive oak doors. He pushed them open with his shoulder, revealing a chamber that was larger than her entire former house. A fire roared in a stone fireplace tall enough for a man to stand in. In the center of the room, a large wooden tub steamed, the water scented with lavender and chamomile. An old woman with kind eyes and hair like spun silver stood waiting. "Ilara will see to you," Cain said, his voice a low rumble. He set Anya down on her feet, but his hands lingered on her arms for a second as if reluctant to let go. His golden eye held hers. "You are safe here. No one will harm you." He turned and left, closing the doors softly behind him, leaving Anya in the care of the elder. Ilara's touch was gentle, her movements unhurried. She did not speak much, sensing Anya's own silence was not one to be broken by idle chatter. She helped her out of the filthy, rain-soaked rags, her expression showing no disgust at the mud or the pale scars, only a quiet compassion. The hot water was a shock, a blissful liquid heat that sank deep into her bones, chasing away a chill that felt years old. Ilara washed her hair, her strong fingers massaging her scalp, and scrubbed the grime from her skin until it was pink and clean. It was a baptism, washing away not just the mud of the road, but the filth of her past. Afterward, she was wrapped in a towel of thick, soft cotton and led to the fire. Laid out on a massive bed piled high with furs were new clothes, a simple underdress of the softest linen, a tunic of deep forest green wool, and leggings of supple, dark leather. They fit as if they were made for her. For the first time, Anya felt clean. She felt warm. She felt human. A few days later, Anya found herself wandering the corridors of Ironhold, a silent observer in this new world. She was drawn by a low, pained groan to the pack's infirmary. Inside, a massive warrior lay on a cot, his leg bandaged crudely, the flesh around it an angry, inflamed red. He was delirious with fever, thrashing against the healers who tried to hold him down. His inner beast was close to the surface, agitated by the pain and the scent of infection. Anya felt his agony as if it were her own, a sharp, throbbing spike behind her eyes. Without thinking, she moved forward. The other healers backed away, but she approached the cot, her steps silent. She placed a small, cool hand on the warrior's sweat-slicked forehead. He flinched, his eyes snapping open, but when he saw her, the feral growl in his chest subsided. A wave of calm emanated from her, a silent hum of empathy that soothed the raging beast within him. His thrashing ceased. He stared at her, his breathing still ragged but no longer violent. She turned to the shelves of herbs, her eyes scanning the familiar jars. She moved with a quiet confidence, pulling down yarrow to stem the bleeding, comfrey to knit the flesh, and willow bark for the fever. She crushed them with a pestle, her movements economical and precise, a knowledge ingrained in her by the only person who had ever loved her grandmother. She worked the herbs into a poultice and, with Alara's help, unwrapped the wound. It was worse than she thought, deep and festering. Without flinching, she cleaned it and applied the poultice, her touch feather-light. She didn't know Cain had been standing in the doorway, watching the entire exchange. He had seen her walk into a storm of pain and chaos and bring a dead calm. He saw the respect in the eyes of his best healers as they watched her work. She was not just his mate, she was a gift to his entire pack. That night, he led her to the highest peak of the fortress, a wind-swept battlement that overlooked the vast, moonlit expanse of his territory. The wind tugged at her hair, and for the first time, she did not shiver from cold, but from the breathtaking beauty of it all. "This is all yours too," Cain said, his voice quiet beside her. He gestured not to the land, but to a small, walled-off section of the peak, a garden sheltered from the wind. Inside, under the moonlight, grew dozens of rare and potent herbs, their silver-green leaves glowing faintly. "I had them brought from the southern mountains, a garden for the healer of my pack." Anya stared, her heart aching with an emotion she couldn't name. No one had ever given her a gift, not one that mattered. She looked up at him, her gray eyes shining with unshed tears. He reached out, his calloused thumb gently wiping a tear from her cheek. "They gave you scars," he whispered, his golden eye burning with an intensity that stole her breath. "I will give you a kingdom built upon them." He looked out at the dark forest, a shadow of an old pain crossing his face. "An alpha king is a lonely thing, Anya. I have warriors, but no equals. I have a pack, but no partner. I was a king in a fortress of stone, surrounded by ghosts. And then, you came. You filled the silence." She understood. His loneliness was a different shape than hers, but it was made of the same material. She reached up, her small hand resting against his scarred cheek. It was a gesture of acceptance, of understanding, of coming home. He lowered his head, his gaze asking a question she answered with a slight nod. This was not a surrender, it was a choice. He bent his neck, his lips brushing the sensitive skin where her shoulder met her neck. His fangs extended, and for a fleeting second, a primal fear shot through her. But it was immediately overwhelmed by a wave of possessive warmth, of absolute belonging, as he bit down. It was not a bite of violence, but of union. A searing, brilliant heat flooded her veins, a golden light that connected her soul to his. The mate bond settled, a permanent, unbreakable chain forged in moonlight and magic. He licked the wound clean, and as the skin healed, leaving behind a new, perfect mark of silver swirls, he rested his forehead against hers. Anya closed her eyes, feeling the thrum of his life force intertwined with her own. The empty, aching space inside her chest was gone. It was filled now, overflowing with a love so fierce and absolute, it felt like the sun. She was no longer the broken Omega. She was the Luna of Blackstone. And she was finally, irrevocably, whole. The first snows of the deep winter fell like a shroud, blanketing the Blackstone territory in a pristine, silent white. Inside the mountain fortress of Ironhold, however, life was a bastion of warmth and abundance. Fires roared in every hearth, the great hall was filled with the rich scent of spiced stew and baking bread, and the sounds of children's laughter echoed off the stone walls. The brutal cold was a distant threat, a beast held at bay by the pack's strength and foresight. It was a peace Anya had never known, a security that had settled into her very bones. One evening, as she and Cain sat before the great hearth in their private chambers, a warrior from the Gate Watch requested an audience. His face was grim, his fur cloak dusted with fresh snow. "Alpha King," he said, bowing low. "3 petitioners from the south. They claim to be of the Dry Creek clan. They're starving. They beg for aid." A stillness fell over Anya. Dry Creek. The name was a ghost, a half-forgotten nightmare. Cain's golden eye found hers, a silent question in its depths. She gave a single, slow nod. Her past had finally come knocking. They were brought to the throne room, a place of imposing shadows and flickering torchlight. Cain sat upon his throne of carved stone and ironwood, a silent, brooding monarch. Anya was seated beside him on a slightly smaller yet equally ornate chair, a queen at her king's side. She was draped in a gown of deep forest green wool, a heavy silver torque gleaming at her throat. The intricate, swirling lines of her mate mark were a stark, beautiful silver against the warm skin of her neck. She was the picture of health and power, her calm gaze holding a weight that her old family would never recognize. When the 3 figures were led in, shivering and gaunt, the breath caught in Anya's throat. Her father, Gideon, looked shrunken, his alpha authority stripped away by desperation, leaving only a bitter, hollowed-out man. Her mother, Mara, was skeletal, her eyes darting greedily toward the roaring fires, and Sabine Sabine's golden hair was lank and dull, her beautiful face pinched and sallow. They were pathetic. For a long moment, they didn't recognize her. They saw only the Luna of Blackstone, a powerful, unknown queen. Gideon fell to his knees, his voice cracking. "Great Luna, we throw ourselves on your mercy. Our people are dying. The winter is cruel. We beg for any scraps you can spare." Then Sabine's gaze lifted and locked onto Anya's face. A wave of disbelief, then shock, then a sickening, opportunistic glimmer washed over her features. "Anya," she breathed, the name a strange sound in the vast hall. "Sister, it's you." Gideon and Mara looked up, their jaws slackening in stunned silence. They saw the girl they had thrown away, now seated on a throne, adorned in wealth they couldn't imagine. The calculation was immediate. Sabine scrambled forward, her voice dripping with a false, cloying sweetness. "Oh, Anya, we thought you were dead. We grieved for you. You must help us. We are blood after all." Anya watched them, her heart a calm, steady drum in her chest. Cain remained motionless beside her, a mountain of silent, waiting power. He was giving this moment to her. This was her judgment to pass. Slowly, gracefully, Anya stood. The rustle of her woolen gown was the only sound in the cavernous room. She took a breath, feeling the air move over vocal cords that had been silent for a decade. When she spoke, her voice was not the timid whisper they might have expected. It was low, a little rough, like stones grinding together after a long stillness, but it was as clear and unbreakable as the mountain around them. "There are no ties," she said. The words fell into the silence, each one a perfectly weighted stone. Sabine flinched as if struck. "You cut them," Anya continued, her gray eyes holding Gideon's gaze, pinning him where he knelt. "You cut them the day you sold me to settle a debt. You didn't come here looking for me. You came for what I have." She turned her head slightly, her gaze sweeping over all three of them, seeing them not as family, but as strangers. Desperate, grasping strangers. She looked to Cain, her voice firm with the finality of her decision. "They are not my people." That was all Cain needed. He rose from his throne, and the very temperature in the room seemed to drop. His sheer presence was an overwhelming force, a physical pressure that made Gideon and his family cringe back toward the floor. His voice was not a shout, but the low, terrifying growl of an avalanche gathering speed. "You come into my hall and beg for scraps from the queen you discarded," he rumbled, his golden eye burning with cold fire. "You dare speak of blood to the woman whose blood you traded for a patch of barren land." He took a step forward, his shadow engulfing them. "My mate is the heart of this pack. Her healing hands have saved my warriors. Her gentle spirit has brought this mountain a peace it has never known. She is a treasure beyond any price. And you saw her as a burden." He gestured to the guards. "You will be given 1 sack of dried meat and a single flint, the same consideration you gave her when you left her for dead. You are banished from these lands. If you are ever seen within the borders of Blackstone territory again, my wolves will feast on your bones." As the guards dragged them away, Sabine screaming curses and Gideon weeping in pathetic terror, Anya felt nothing. Not triumph, not hatred, not even pity. She felt only a profound and sudden quiet in her soul. The space that had been filled with a dull, constant ache for 19 years was simply empty. The wound had finally closed. Later, wrapped in the warmth of Cain's arms before the fire in their chambers, she rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. He held her close, his chin resting on the top of her head, his familiar scent of pine and storm a comforting shield. He bent his head and whispered against her hair, the 2 words that had redefined her existence. "My treasure." She looked into the dancing flames, seeing not the past, but a future illuminated by this incredible, impossible love. Her family had seen her as a flawed object, a debt to be paid. The world had seen her as broken, a thing to be discarded in the storm. They had all been wrong. Here, in the heart of the most powerful pack in the lands, in the arms of the most feared Alpha King, she finally understood the truth. They had tried to make her a payment, a thing to be exchanged, but she was never a price to be paid. She was the prize.